In the midst of this energetic chaos strode Kemi, 9 months pregnant and visibly exhausted. Her hand rested gently on her swollen belly as she navigated the crowded, uneven sidewalk with a determined pace, her sandals clicking softly against the cracked pavement scattered with discarded wrappers and leaves. Around her, colorful fabrics billowed like sails in the evening wind, vibrant asooke, patterned ankara, and shimmering lace. Voices called out in Yoruba and Pidgin English, blending into the city's ceaseless soundtrack. The distant hum of drums and laughter from a nearby wedding floated through the air, hinting at celebration amid the city's relentless hustle. Children darted between stalls, their laughter mingling with the calls of hawkers promoting everything from cold water to freshly peeled oranges. Her face was pale but resolute, beads of sweat glistening on her brow despite the cooling breeze. The weight of her pregnancy pressed heavily on her back, and each step was a silent negotiation with pain and fatigue. Yet, her eyes burned with quiet strength, fixed on the path ahead. She took a slow breath, tasting the mingled smells of spices and sea salt, willing herself to keep moving. Suddenly, a black luxury SUV screeched to a halt a few feet ahead, drawing the attention of the crowd. The vehicle's polished surface gleamed under the streetlights, its tinted windows reflecting the chaos around it like a dark mirror. From the windows emerged Tunde Omotayo, the spoilt son of one of Nigeria's richest billionaires. His crisp designer clothes clashed sharply with the dirt and dust of the street, the scent of his expensive cologne, woodsy and sharp, cutting through the ambient smells. His scowl was as sharp as the tailored lines of his suit, his eyes scanning the crowd with impatience. Tunde's reputation preceded him, arrogant, reckless, and used to getting his way without question. Today he was impatient, eager to get to his lavish party, and the congested street was testing his limits. Kemi, caught unwittingly in his path, barely noticed the approaching danger. Her focus was inward, on the baby within her, the life growing stronger despite the hardships she faced. The bustling street seemed to pause, a collective breath held, as fate prepared to intervene in their lives. The sounds of the city, the honking horns, the chatter of vendors, the distant laughter, momentarily dulled, replaced by a tense silence that stretched as long as the fading daylight. Kemi's days were filled with struggle and hope, woven tightly like the intricate patterns she sewed. Born in the dusty suburbs of Lagos, where the red earth cracked underfoot during the dry season, she had always dreamed of a better future for her child. Her father, a mechanic with rough hands and a gentle smile, had passed away when she was young, leaving behind a void and a legacy of resilience. His workshop, once filled with the scent of motor oil and metal, was now silent, but the lessons he taught her, hard work, patience, and integrity, remained alive in her heart. Her mother, a market trader with a voice that could carry across a busy stall, worked tirelessly from dawn till dusk, weaving her own dreams into the fabric of the city. The clatter of beads and bolts from her stall was a daily soundtrack, punctuated by the rhythmic calls of fresh tomatoes. "Pepper, come by!" Despite their limited means, Kemi had excelled in school, her sharp intellect and quiet determination earning her a scholarship to university. She remembered sitting under a flickering lamp, poring over textbooks, the sound of rain tapping against the tin roof above her. But life had dealt her a difficult hand. She had met Tunde a year earlier at a charity event where his charm, like a polished mask, had initially masked a selfish streak that would soon reveal itself. Their brief relationship ended abruptly when she discovered she was pregnant. Now, with limited support and a looming delivery date, Kemi worked as a seamstress, sewing intricate patterns for Lagos's elite, her fingers nimble despite the swelling of her hands. The tactile feel of the soft fabrics, smooth silk, rough cotton, was a small comfort amid uncertainty. Her tiny apartment on the 3rd floor of a crumbling building was a sanctuary of makeshift comforts. The walls, once painted a bright yellow, were now faded and chipped, but inside, a crib crafted from salvaged wood stood proudly, adorned with hand-stitched blankets. Colorful fabrics were folded neatly on shelves, their vibrant patterns offering a stark contrast to the peeling paint. A worn photograph of her mother, smiling proudly despite the hardships, sat framed on a battered dresser. Every evening, Kemi rested against the window, listening to the city's heartbeat, the distant honking horns, the chatter of street vendors, the occasional laughter of children playing in the alley below, and dreaming of a life where her child could thrive. The faint scent of jasmine from a neighbor's balcony drifted in, mingling with the humid air. Despite the exhaustion etched deep in her bones and the ache in her back, Kemi's spirit remained unbroken. She was determined to protect her unborn baby, no matter the obstacles that towered like shadows around her. Tunde's impatience was a storm ready to break. His days were spent in indulgence, Luxurious cars with roaring engines, expensive whiskey that burned smoothly down his throat, and nights filled with lavish parties where the music pulsed like a heartbeat and the champagne flowed like rivers. His penthouse apartment, overlooking the city's sparkling lights, was a fortress of excess. Yet beneath the arrogance lay a deep insecurity, a shadow cast by towering expectations from his family. His reckless behavior was a mask, a desperate attempt to hide his fear of failure and rejection. The constant pressure to live up to his father's legacy bore heavily on his broad shoulders. On this particular evening, Tunde's temper flared after a minor dispute with his driver. The streets were crowded, filled with honking cars and frustrated pedestrians, and his plans delayed beyond tolerance. The air was thick with exhaust fumes and the scent of burning rubber from impatient brakes. When he spotted Kemi struggling to cross the road, her heavy steps slow and faltering, his irritation boiled over like molten lava. Without thought, he flung the car door open and stormed toward her, the sound of his footsteps sharp against the cacophony of the street. Kemi froze, her heart pounding not just from her pregnancy, but from the sudden confrontation. Her breath caught in her throat as Tunde's presence loomed over her, his eyes flashing with impatience. She was too weary to defend herself, and in a moment of cruel recklessness, Tunde's foot struck her leg. The sharp pain radiated through her body, and she stumbled, clutching her belly in agony. The crowd gasped as the pregnant woman faltered, their murmurs swelling into whispers of shock and anger. Cameras flashed, the light briefly blinding in the twilight. The spoiled billionaire's son had just kicked a 9-month pregnant woman in public, a scene impossible to ignore. But this was only the beginning of a story that would shake Lagos to its core. Chaos erupted around them like a sudden storm. Some rushed to Kemi's side, their faces etched with concern and disbelief, while others pulled out phones, eager to capture the moment in sharp digital clarity. The air vibrated with a mix of outrage and disbelief. Tunde's chauffeur hurried over, his voice low and hurried as he tried to defuse the situation, but the damage was done. The sound of footsteps and urgent whispers swirled in the evening air, mingling with the fading hum of the city. Kemi's face was pale, sweat mingling with tears that streamed silently down her cheeks. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why did you do that?" Her voice was fragile, yet threaded with a quiet strength born of pain. Tunde sneered, his jaw clenched tight. "Move aside, woman. You're blocking the way," he snapped, his tone cruel and dismissive. The crowd grew louder, some shouting for justice, others calling for police intervention. The tension was thick, the air heavy with the weight of collective anger and disbelief. Vendors stopped their calls, children quieted, and the city seemed to hold its breath as murmurs rippled through the gathering crowd. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke through the tumult. Kemi's friend, Ifeoma, appeared, pushing fiercely through the crowd, her eyes blazing with fury. "Tunde, how can you be so heartless?" she demanded, her voice rising. "She's about to have a child." Tunde's jaw tightened further, the usual smugness replaced by a flicker of unease. He was used to getting away with his behavior, but tonight, the public eye was unforgiving. The incident spread like wildfire on social media, igniting debates about privilege, responsibility, and the treatment of women in Lagos. As Kemi was helped into a nearby clinic, the ripples of this moment set in motion a chain of events that neither she nor Tunde could have imagined. The following morning, Lagos was abuzz with news of the incident. The city's pulse thrummed with a mix of outrage and curiosity. Headlines splashed across newspapers and screens. Radio stations replayed snippets of eyewitness accounts while social media was alight with hashtags demanding accountability. Kemi sat quietly in the clinic, the dull ache in her leg a pale shadow compared to the storm raging inside her. Ifeoma sat beside her, scrolling through messages of support on her phone, words of encouragement from strangers and friends alike. "I can't just let this go," Kemi said, her voice firm despite the exhaustion that tugged at her eyelids. "He needs to be held accountable." Ifeoma nodded, her fingers tightening around Kemi's hand. "We need to report this officially. The police, the press, anything that can pressure his family." But the reality was harsh and unyielding. Tunde's family was powerful, their influence stretching into the highest corridors of Lagos society, and many feared speaking out. Yet Kemi's courage was a beacon, a spark igniting a fire of determination. She resolved to file a formal complaint, backed by detailed medical reports and witness statements collected by supporters. Word spread quickly. Support poured in from women's groups, activists, and everyday Lagosians who saw in Kemi's story a reflection of their own struggles and silent sufferings. The city's energy, once just background noise, now shifted palpably, and for the first time, Tunde's arrogance met a formidable opponent. The path to justice was anything but smooth. Tunde's family deployed a legion of lawyers and wielded their vast influence to discredit Kemi and silence her supporters. Rumors were spread. A careless mother, a desperate attention seeker, and some witnesses were pressured with veiled threats to withdraw their statements. The shadows lengthened, threatening to swallow the light she had kindled. Kemi felt the weight of the battle like a heavy cloak. Late-night calls with Ifeoma often ended in tears, frustration bubbling to the surface like a storm refusing to be tamed. The clinic visits continued, the pain from the kick occasionally flaring sharply, a cruel reminder of that day's violence. The sterile smell of antiseptic clung to her skin after each visit, a constant reminder of her vulnerability. Yet Kemi's resolve hardened like tempered steel. She attended community meetings, spoke to journalists with a fierce clarity, and found unexpected allies in human rights organizations, their voices joining hers in a chorus demanding change. The city's energy, once a backdrop to her hardship, now fueled her fight, a fierce drumbeat of resistance. At home, the small apartment seemed to shrink under the pressure, walls closing in with the weight of fear and hope intertwined. Yet every night, as she rested her hand on her belly, she whispered promises to her unborn child, a life of dignity, love, and hope, a future worth fighting for. In the midst of the turmoil, relationships blossomed in unlikely places. Among Kemi's supporters was Ade, a young lawyer passionate about justice and equality. He had followed the story closely, his eyes reflecting a quiet determination, and offered pro bono assistance, navigating the complex legal landscape with steady hands and a sharp mind. His office, lined with books and case files, became a refuge of strategy and hope. Their meetings were a blend of strategy and quiet moments where hope flickered like candlelight in a dark room. Ade admired Kemi's courage and resilience, the way her voice carried strength despite exhaustion. Kemi found comfort in his steady presence, the calm in the storm, a reminder that she was not alone. Meanwhile, tensions grew between Tunde and his family. His father, a stern patriarch with a voice like thunder, demanded control and silence, while his mother pleaded for a discreet resolution, her eyes haunted by shame and love. Tunde himself wrestled with guilt and denial, his privileged world cracking at the edges as he confronted the consequences of his actions. Amid Lagos's chaotic rhythm, these relationships intertwined, setting the stage for transformation, a fragile yet powerful dance between pain, growth, and hope. One evening, as rain poured over Lagos in relentless sheets, drumming a steady rhythm on the tin roofs and slick streets, Kemi sat by her window reflecting on the journey. The storm outside mirrored her internal struggle, the fear, pain, and uncertainty swirling within like the tempest beyond the glass. The scent of wet earth and rain-soaked asphalt filled the air, grounding her in the moment. Ade visited, bringing news of progress and quiet encouragement. He handed her a folder of legal documents and reports, his voice soft but firm. "You're stronger than you know," he said gently. "This fight is bigger than just one moment." Kemi smiled faintly, her eyes moist but steady. "I used to think strength was loud and fierce," she admitted. "Now I see its quiet endurance and hope." Inspired by her words, Ade suggested organizing a public forum to discuss women's rights and violence prevention, a space for voices to rise and stories to be heard. Kemi hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face, but then nodded, recognizing the power in turning pain into purpose. That night, as the city's lights flickered against the storm and thunder rumbled in the distance, Kemi felt a shift within, a readiness to face whatever came next with courage and grace. The courtroom was packed, tension thick like the Lagos heat that seemed to seep through the walls. The air was heavy with anticipation, the murmurs of the crowd rising and falling like waves. The scent of polished wood mingled with the faint aroma of perfume and sweat. Tunde sat rigid, his usual arrogance replaced by unease and a flicker of shame. His sharp suit felt like a cage, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Kemi entered with Ifeoma and Ade, her steps steady despite the weight of the moment and the swelling in her belly. Her face was calm but resolute, eyes shining with quiet fire. The soft rustle of her skirt was barely audible over the murmurs. Evidence was presented, the detailed medical reports describing her injuries, witness testimonies recounting the incident with vivid clarity, and the social media outcry that had sparked a citywide conversation. The defense tried to minimize the incident, weaving half-truths and distractions, but the truth was undeniable. Suddenly, a witness stepped forward, a driver from a nearby street who had recorded the moment before the kick. The video played on the courtroom screen, the sharp images showing Tunde's impatience turning to aggression, shattering his claims of innocence. Gasps echoed through the room, the weight of the truth settling like a stone. Tunde's face paled, the color draining away. The judge called for order, and the atmosphere shifted from confrontation to reckoning. Outside, the crowd waited anxiously, the city holding its breath. The outcome of this trial would ripple beyond the courtroom walls, touching lives across Lagos. The verdict was delivered with solemn finality. Tunde was found guilty of assault, and ordered to pay restitution to Kemi. The sentence also included community service focused on supporting women's shelters and counseling programs, a mandate to face and address the harm caused. The courtroom's heavy silence was broken only by the judge's firm voice echoing in the chamber. The news spread rapidly, celebrated by activists and ordinary citizens alike who saw justice served. For Kemi, it was a bittersweet victory. Justice had been served, but scars remained, both visible and invisible. The faint ache in her leg was a constant reminder, but so was the strength she had found. Tunde's world unraveled. The public disgrace forced reflection that had long eluded him. His family distanced themselves, their cold silence a harsh rebuke. He began attending therapy sessions, confronting the roots of his behavior, the fear, the anger, and the weight of expectations. Kemi returned home, exhausted but hopeful. The city's pulse continued, loud, relentless, unyielding, but something had changed. A narrative of resilience and accountability had been written across Lagos's streets, a story that would inspire many. Despite the court's ruling, tension lingered in the humid air. Tunde had avoided public appearances, but whispers suggested he planned to make amends or stir further trouble. The uncertainty was a shadow looming over Kemi's fragile peace. The faint buzz of gossip in cafes and offices only heightened the suspense. Encouraged by Adede Ifeoma, Kemi prepared for a public forum where Tunde was expected to speak. It would be a confrontation not just of words but of wills, a moment charged with the weight of the past and the hopes for the future. She practiced her speech tirelessly, focusing on the power of forgiveness and the urgent need for societal change. Her voice, once trembling with fear, now carried strength and clarity. The forum was to be held at the popular Freedom Park, a symbol of Lagos's resilience and a gathering place for voices seeking justice. As the day approached, Kemi felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. The past might have shaped her, but the future was hers to claim, one word at a time. The crowd at Freedom Park was electric. Thousands gathered under the bright Lagos sun, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of freshly cut grass. Vendors sold cool drinks and snacks, their calls weaving through the murmur of voices. Children darted between legs, laughter ringing like bells. The rustle of leaves and the distant hum of traffic formed a lively backdrop. Tunde stepped onto the stage, his demeanor humble and apologetic, a stark contrast to the man he had been. He spoke of regret, growth, and the desire to make amends, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. The sincerity in his tone surprised many, sparking murmurs among the crowd. When it was Kemi's turn, she stepped forward, her posture tall despite the weight of her pregnancy. Her voice was clear and steady, carrying across the crowd like a rallying cry. "This is not just my story," she said, "but a call for change. We must protect the vulnerable, respect women, and hold power accountable." Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the back. A man shouted insults, attempting to disrupt the peace, his voice sharp and angry. Security quickly intervened, moving swiftly to restore calm, but the moment underscored the fragility of progress. Kemi's eyes met Tunde's, no longer a spoiled son, but a man learning the weight of his actions. The crowd erupted in applause, hope blossoming among the gathered faces like flowers after rain. In the weeks that followed, Kemi and Tunde embarked on a cautious journey toward understanding. Tunde volunteered at women's shelters, listening intently to stories that humbled and changed him. He worked quietly, the arrogance stripped away by empathy and reflection. The scent of fresh paint and cleaning supplies in the shelters became a new backdrop to his experiences. Kemi found strength in forgiveness, not for Tunde, but for herself, a release from the chains of bitterness. Their relationship evolved, not as lovers, but as advocates united by a shared purpose. Together, they launched campaigns to raise awareness about domestic violence and the rights of pregnant women in Lagos, their voices amplifying the call for change. Kemi's child was born healthy, a symbol of resilience amid hardship. The crib, crafted from salvaged wood, stood proudly in her home, a testament to hope and new beginnings. The infant's soft coos filled the small apartment with light, a melody of life renewed. Lagos continued its vibrant rhythm, but for Kemi, every sunset now carried the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Months later, Kemi stood at the window of her apartment, watching the Lagos skyline shimmer with life as the sun dipped low. The city was a glowing tapestry of lights, streets weaving golden threads between towering buildings, the distant waves whispering secrets to the shore. The cool evening breeze carried the mingled scents of the ocean and street food vendors winding down their day. Ade had joined her in celebrating the launch of a new foundation supporting expectant mothers in vulnerable communities, a dream realized through perseverance and hope. The foundation's logo, a vibrant butterfly emerging from a cocoon, symbolized transformation and new life. The city's sounds, the honking cars, the distant waves, the laughter of children playing in the streets, were a symphony of survival and joy. The scent of rain lingered in the warm air, promising renewal. Tunde, transformed by his journey, had become an unlikely ally, using his influence to support reforms and empower women. His presence was quieter now, less brash, more thoughtful. Kemi smiled, her hand resting gently on her baby's cradle. The path had been rocky, marked by pain and courage, but she had emerged stronger. In Lagos, where shadows and light danced endlessly, a new story was being written, one of hope, resilience, and the power of change.